Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to week 3 of our Global Affairs series, where we break down the biggest power moves shaping our world. Let's move to our first story of the week. Donald Trump had a big goal. He wanted America to make everything again, from steel, cars, furniture, all proudly stamped made in the USA. To do that, he put tariff, that is, extra taxes on goods coming from other countries. The idea was quite simple: make foreign products expensive so people buy American ones instead. But what looked good in theory has failed in reality. Trump's trade war has backfired. It was supposed to hurt other countries, but it is hurting Americans more. Let's see how. Who really pays for these tariffs? Many things foreign countries do, but that's not true. In reality, most of the cost is paid by American businesses and consumers. Here's how it breaks down. According to Bloomberg report, 22% is paid by US companies, 18% is paid by foreign exporters, and 5% is lost in loopholes. And 55%, that is more than a half, is being paid by American consumers themselves. So the people these tariffs were meant to help are actually paying the most. A Harvard study looked at over 350,000 products and found that imported goods in the US are now 4% more expensive, and even American made goods are 2% more costlier. So, in the end, the burden falls on everyday people. And this comes at a very bad time when inflation is already high. Goldman Sachs says Trump tariffs have added 0.4% to inflation and that could reach 0.6% next year. What about the overall economy? The US isn't in crisis, but it is slowing down. Growth for 2025 is expected to be around 1.8%. It is not a collapse, but far below the strong economy that Trump had promised. And while Americans are paying more at home, they are also losing respect abroad. The Henley Passport Index report now ranks US at number 12, the first time it's fallen out of top 10. A decade ago, it was number 1. This shows a clear drop in America's soft power, its global influence. And that's the ultimate irony. The American First policy was meant to make others pay, but in the end, America ended up paying the price in terms of money, image, and influence. From economic battlefields in Washington to real worlds on the Durand Line, the world today is on an edge. Pakistan and Afghanistan are once again locked in conflict. Pakistan and Afghanistan, two neighbors that share history, culture, and border that never truly found peace. In October, their fragile relationship was tested once again. What began as a border tension turned into a full-blown clashes along the Chaman Crossing, one of the busiest trade routes between two countries. For days, heavy gunfire and shelling echoed across Durand Line. Pakistan said it was responding to the attacks from Tehreek-e-Taliban Pakistan, the TTP, that is, militant hiding inside Afghanistan. Kabul accused Islamabad of violating its sovereignty and targeting civilians. The result? Dozens of lives lost, hundreds injured, and trade brought to a halt. And then came the turning point. After a week of escalating violence, Qatar and Turkey stepped in as a mediator. Their quiet diplomacy worked. On October 19, both countries agreed to an immediate ceasefire in Doha. The deal was simple. Pakistan would stop airstrikes and Afghan Taliban would ensure that no group uses Afghan soil to attack Pakistan. Pakistan Defense Minister Khwaja Asif made it clear peace will only be held if Afghanistan controls TTP. The Taliban spokesperson Zabiullah Mujahid replied, any violation of Afghan territory will not be tolerated. So what's really happening behind the scenes? Pakistan wants security. Afghanistan wants sovereignty. Both have legitimate concerns, but no mechanism to verify each other's actions. Here's the bigger picture. This isn't just about a border fight, it's about regional stability. Every clash on the Durand Line affects trade. It affects CPEC routes and the fragile balance of the South Asia. A peaceful Afghanistan means a secure Pakistan and vice versa. This ceasefire is not a breakthrough, it's a pause that could lead to peace or back to a conflict. The way out lies in joint border monitoring, verified intelligence sharing, and above all, political courage on both sides. Because the history shows when Pakistan and Afghanistan fight, the region burns, and when they talk, the region breathes. Now let's turn into another battlefield, not one of tanks and missiles, but of trade and tariffs. A war that's being fought in the boardrooms and cargo ports between the world's two largest economies, that is the United States and China. For months, both sides have been negotiating, talking about peace, but what we have really seen is an escalation. Talks have stalled, tensions have grown, and now new front has opened up. Both countries have slapped port fees, extra charges on incoming ships. A Chinese vessel docking in an American port pays a tax. An American ship entering China faces the same. A tit for tat move that already costing exporters millions. But this is not just about shipping, it is part of China's counter strategy. Beijing has tightened control over the rare earth minerals, the building blocks for our tech world. These elements power smartphones, batteries, and electric cars, and China controls over 70% of its global supply. Now it is using its dominance as a weapon, restricting exports, refusing to share processing technology, and cutting down soybean import from the US. How did Washington react? In a classic Trump style, with more threats. Another 100% tariff on Chinese goods, and this time he's following through, targeting items like furniture, timber, and kitchen cabinets. The result? Trade war is spreading from tariff to shipping, agriculture, and manufacturing. But while Americans turn up the pressure, China seems to be adapting. Its exports jumped 8.2% in September, hitting 320 billion US dollar, even as sales in the United States fell by 27%. China simply pivoted, increasing exports to Europe and other markets. And now all eyes are on upcoming Trump and Xi meeting at the APEC summit. If both sides fail to find the common ground, this economic duel could shake the entire global economy. Because when the dispute is now multi-front economic confrontation, and it is making the world more expensive and more uncertain. So now let's move to the heart of the story, a high-stakes meeting inside the White House, where hopes of support turned into a test of survival. What began as a diplomatic visit by Ukraine's president soon became a tense exchange, a clash of visions, a power, and a territory. This is the story of Volodymyr Zelensky versus Donald Trump and their battle over Donbass. For weeks, Ukraine leader flew to Washington with a clear request: a long-range Tomahawk missiles, a solid US commitment to help, and a place in future talks with Russia. He arrived hopeful, but things turned quickly. On his way, President Trump took a 90-minute phone call with Russian President Vladimir Putin. According to aides, the tone was cordial. Russians described it as constructive. But for Ukraine, the alarm bells rang. Hours later, Trump announced he was willing to meet Putin in Budapest soon, raising questions about Ukraine's role. At the White House meeting, instead of support, Zelensky faced pressure. Trump reportedly urged Ukraine to give up the entire Donbas region, that is more than a 50,000 square kilometer area or over 20% of Ukraine's territory, to Russia. When Zelensky showed map to the front line, Trump reportedly said it was too complicated and warned Ukraine, if there is no peace deal, Putin will destroy you. So, what Zelensky wanted was Tomahawk missile, US military aid, and a role in upcoming Trump-Putin talks. But what he got instead? A vague promise of dialogue, a suggestion to freeze the current line. Trump floated the idea of dividing the Donbass. If Ukraine gave up the large territory, it not only loses the land, it may also lose future security and leverage. A US-Russia deal without Ukraine's full input could change the war outcome, possibly not in Ukraine's favor. Similarly, global allies are watching. If Ukraine is sidelined, the message to the other smaller stake is very simple, that your interest may be traded off. While America fights trade war, China is fighting a different battle. No noise, no sanctions, just quiet move to replace dollar with yuan. Beijing is quietly rewriting the financial rule book. It wants the yuan, not the dollar, to become the new face of the global trade. And it's moving carefully on two powerful fronts. Front 1 is the currency swaps. China has reached out deal with the Japan and South Korea. Yes, you heard it right. Two America's closest allies with the interesting proposal, a currency swap agreement. What does that mean? Simply put, both sides agree to trade in their own currencies. No dollars involved. China already has similar deal with dozens of nations, but this one stands out because Japan and South Korea aren't trading partner, they are America's inner circle. Still, Trump's tariff have hurt them too, and China sees as an opening. Beijing is pitching the yuan as a safer bet, a currency that is less controlled by politics, and it is working. Trump's trade war have weakened the dollar's value, giving China a perfect moment to strike. That's the first step, using currency swaps to build the yuan's influence across Asia. Now, the front 2 is debt diplomacy. The second move is even smarter, debt conversion. China is offering cheaper loans in yuan. It is telling countries, why borrow in dollars, borrow in our currency instead. Here's why it's tempting. China's interest rates are lower, which means smaller repayments and lighter EMIs. Take Ethiopia for instance. It had a $5.3 billion loan from China. Now it is being shifted to yuan. Or Kenya, after converting a Chinese loan into yuan, it saved $250 million. And they are not alone. Hungary, Kazakhstan, and Sri Lanka all have borrowed or issued bonds in yuan. So far this year, governments and companies have raised 68 billion yuan. That's about 9.5 billion, double last year figure. Each deal reduces dependence on dollar and strengthens Beijing's grip. Today, the yuan accounts for 8.5% of the global trade transactions, making it fifth most traded currency, right behind the British pound at 10%. It's not yet matched for the dollar, but it is catching up. China shows this is a long game and it is playing with the patience. In June this year, China's central bank's governor made it crystal clear. He said, the world is moving towards a multipolar currency system. The global economy depends too much on the US dollar. He predicted a future where several strong currencies balance one another, not just one single dominant dollar. For Donald Trump, that's bad news. Defending dollar supremacy is one of his biggest political promise, but Beijing is slowly turning up the heat. The message from China is simple. The greenbacks era of absolute power may be coming to an end, and this time it is not the trade war, it is currency war, quiet, strategic, and potentially unstoppable. They say wars are fought with bullets and bombs, but in today's world, the most powerful weapon doesn't explode, it is sanctions. One stroke of a pen in Washington can cripple a nation's economy thousands of miles away. And that's exactly what we are seeing now. Donald Trump has decided to fight his war not on the battlefield but in the markets. His new target is Russian oil lifeline. His new weapon is the economic sanction. These are not a symbolic moves. They are direct strike on the heart of Moscow's energy empire. So let's break this down for you. Donald Trump has tried every possible move to end the war in Ukraine. He pressured Moscow, he limited weapons, he even sat across the table from Vladimir Putin, but none of it worked. And now Trump has decided to use America's most powerful weapon, that is sanctions. This week, US government decided to sanction two of the Russian biggest oil giants, that is Rosneft and Lukoil. These are not small companies. Together they form the backbone of Russian oil industry that is producing half of the country's oil exports. That's around 2 million barrels a day. In Trump words, these are the massive sanctions, the biggest oil companies in Russia. Hopefully, this will bring Putin and Zelensky more reasonable. So, how do these sanctions actually work? There are two layers. First is the direct sanctions. All the assets of the Rosneft and Lukoil in the US are frozen. American companies can't do business with them. The second is secondary sanctions, meaning if a bank in India, China, or Brazil helps Russia to sell oil, it could face US penalties. In short, these sanctions don't just stop at Americans' border, they spread across the global financial system. Trump isn't targeting Moscow, he is testing how far US economic power can reach. The result of Trump's sanction came almost instantly. Global oil prices jumped more than 5%, touching 2 months high. Trump's message is clear. The new battlefield is energy. On one front, Ukraine is hitting Russian oil facilities. Nearly 20% of its production has been damaged. On the other hand, Washington is choking Russia's oil companies through sanctions. The goal is quite simple: cut off Moscow's money and push Putin back to negotiation table. But Putin isn't backing down. In response, he ordered nuclear drills, testing long-range bombers and ballistic missiles. His message is also quite clear: I won't be cornered. It can be said that the world is paying the price for the new battlefield. Together, Rosneft and Lukoil supply around 5.3 million barrels of oil every day. That is 5% of world's total output. Take that off from the market, the price will surge. Analysts say already warns the crude oil could soon reach $70 a barrel. These sanctions are more than just an American move against Russia. They are a message to the entire world that Washington still holds the key to the global financial system. For countries like China and India, this creates a difficult choice: either side with cheap Russian oil or risk with American penalties, or play safe and pay more for the energy. Either way, the ripple is global. Prices are rising, supply chains are tightening, and the era of energy security is now turning into an energy war. So, ladies and gentlemen, that's all for this week. We'll keep tracking these stories and connecting the dots for you. And if you'd like detailed notes or want to read the full analysis of today's topic, a complete PDF is available. Just reach out on the number mentioned in the description below. Thank you so much.